night before I went to bed, I wrote in my journal the following. I think maybe the key to succeeding is trusting and moving forward even when there's no proof. If you stop because you want to know the outcome, you'll never give it enough time to actually work. Sometimes you just have to believe. If you have been stuck in decision paralysis for a while, if you have been considering doing something for a while and you just can't seem to move forward, you've been wanting to start something or do something and you're just like, oh, but I just don't know if it's right, I don't know if it's the right thing, I don't know if it's gonna work, maybe it's not the sensible thing, maybe I should do something else, I just don't know what I want to do. This is for you, because I am right in the trenches with you right now. I am planning my next trip to the US. I have not planned or gone on a big trip for almost a year. And so I'm right in the trenches with you. All of the limiting beliefs. How am I going to make money? What if I get there and I don't like it? What if I spend all my money? What if my nose is itchy? No, it's not. What if my nose is itchy? What if I don't make any friends? What if it's a waste of time? What if I don't get out of it what I want to get out of it? What if there's something better I could do? I get it. These are all of the questions and more that come up when you're trying to make a decision. What you need to do is start seeing yourself as a researcher. You want to see yourself as a scientist, okay? I didn't go to university, so instead of my work being my science, my academia, my life has now become my academia, my research, my experiment, my exploration, my PhD. I am a scientist and my life is my PhD. And so what would you do if you were doing an experiment as a scientist? I'm really channeling my A-level psychology that I did. What would you do? You would write a hypothesis. Okay, you would write a hypothesis and say, I think, what example should we use? I think I would really like to make money as a content creator. Let's use that as an example. Then, oh my God, anyone who actually does science or any form of studying is going to be like, this is not how you write a hypothesis. But just, we're obviously not scientists, okay? And then, once you've got your hypothesis and you've got your idea, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, okay? Isaac Newton didn't see the apple on the ground and immediately think, oh, gravity. There was no word. Like, he didn't know the word gravity. He was just like, oh, that apple's on the floor. What's going on there? Why do those apples keep falling? So he was like, something's going on there. I think there might be something going on there. And then he went into his lab and started conducting experiments, did he? I don't know. And so that's what we have to do, okay? So if you think, okay, let's go back to our hypothesis. I think I would like to make it as a content creator. What experiments would I have to do to start testing out that hypothesis? Okay, so I'd probably have to start making content. So I'd probably have to start figuring out what type of content I like to make. So I should probably pick a platform and start creating on there. Maybe I could start a podcast. Maybe I could do all of these things. And as you start to take part in these experiments and you start seeing your life as these series of experiments, like, there almost can't be a failure. It removes the fear of, what if this doesn't work? Because it can't not work. Like, if you were mixing red and yellow paint and it came out blue, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm such a failure, my life is a mess, I'm an awful person, everything I do is rubbish, I'm never gonna be successful. You'd just be like, okay, that's a bit weird. That didn't go exactly how I thought it would go. Kind of thought that would go orange, but no worries. And then you'd look at it and be like, okay, so that didn't work the way I thought it would. What happened? What did I put into it? Did I do everything the way that I could have done it? Could I have put more effort into making sure the paints were the right color? Oh God, do you ever start with an analogy and then it just gets a bit too deep and you're like, okay, does this still make sense? But do you see what I'm saying? Like, you don't make it about you. There is no right or wrong outcome. It is just the experiment went differently. And then once you're like, this did not happen the way I thought it would, like this paint isn't the right color, what could I do next time? And then you start another experiment. I'll give you my red and yellow making blue example. You know that I started my social media business online thing doing social media strategy and business coaching. I did that for 2 years. Then all of a sudden something didn't start to feel right. I loved it. And so the experiment, I was kind of experimenting with business strategy, business coaching, what it was like to do business mentoring and consulting. Then it started to not really feel 100% right. And so I was like, okay, that experiment is kind of, I'm putting that to bed now. Now I'm going to start a new experiment, and now I'm experimenting more with the kind of personal brand, creator, influencery type business model. And I'm experimenting with that. I'm not attached to this going a certain way. Obviously, I have an idea of how I would like it to go. And I had this idea of, what if I limit the amount of what I noticed? Okay, I'll show you how I kind of came up with this. So I noticed that I'd been spending a lot of time consuming and not a lot of time creating, or much less time creating than actually consuming. And I thought, okay, this is not what I want. And I noticed that whenever I spent too much time consuming other people's content, I started to feel like I was a worthless piece of shit. And I started to think, okay, what would be a fun way to interact with the internet? Because, it's that, I think I posted this on my stories a few days ago, and it was like, I'm torn between documenting the journey and hiding from the internet. And I thought, okay, where is the middle ground for this? I had this idea, okay, this random idea sparked into me. It was like, what if I posted on limited amount of days? What if my social media was limited to 1 or 2 days a week? And then the other days I could spend doing more creative things, and the things that really make me feel creative and give me this output, because I was constantly feeling, this is what I noticed, and I think this is how you make decisions. You notice something isn't right. So what are you noticing right now in your life isn't right? So I noticed that I was spending too much time online. I didn't like that I constantly felt like I had to post every single day, every day I was posting. It would get to 4 p.m. and I thought, I haven't posted on my Instagram stories yet, better look through my camera roll from today and find something to post. And I didn't like that, because I felt like I wasn't putting out, I don't want to say value, but for want of a better word, I felt like I wasn't really expressing what I wanted to express, because I felt like I was on this hamster wheel of having to put things out every day. So it didn't give me any brain space to play with creative ideas and write and get ideas out and kind of form ideas, because I was so in output phase. And so, long story long, I'm like, okay, what would it look like if I only posted 2 days a week and then did other things on the other days? And I kind of thought about it for a while, and I was like, oh God, nobody else does that. The algorithm doesn't support that. The algorithm wants you to post more consistently like that. It doesn't really support you if you post 3 posts in 1 day and then not for the next 3 days. But I thought, okay, what I'm doing right now is not working for me. Posting every day, this constant force to put out things, even if it's only in my mind, that's not working for me. So I can either stay in what I'm doing, or I can just experiment. And so I started experimenting. And so the month of August, I said, okay, I'm only posting on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I'm almost gonna gatekeep myself a little bit. I'm gonna use Tuesdays and Fridays as my content days and as my output content days. And then the other days of the week, I can focus on my writing, my sunroom, my podcast, those 3 things that can be more creative assets. And then Tuesdays and Fridays can be fun Instagram, TikTok days. That's an experiment. I don't know where it will go. I don't know how it will last. I don't know how long I'll do it for. I don't know if it will work. But instead of just trying to kind of figure it out, I decided I'm just going to experiment, because I am a scientist of my life, and sometimes we just have to take experiments. The same thing with my sunroom. I've just announced my sunroom to my stories, only to my stories though, so if you're not in my stories, you won't know this. I have been looking at the idea of starting a sunroom for a while, which is, if you don't know what sunroom is, it's kind of almost like a love child between OnlyFans, Patreon, Instagram, and blogging. It's kind of a platform where you can create whatever you want to create for the people that are in your audience that love your content, and there is a paywall for it. So you can kind of gatekeep who gets to see it, which I like, because then I can post more personal writing, more personal stories, algorithm free, so you can kind of create whatever you want to create. It doesn't have to be a certain type of format or style or whatever. I've been thinking about it for a while, and there were so many reasons why I shouldn't do it. Oh, my audience isn't very big, I haven't been posting consistently, will people think I'm a sellout if I start doing paywalled content, all of these thoughts. But then the scientist in me kicked in again, and I was like, why don't you just experiment? Why don't you just try it, experiment, see if you like it, and after a month or 2 months, if you don't like it and it doesn't feel right, then you just don't do it anymore. Obviously, it's scary to start something when we don't have the blueprint, and I think that's why so many people follow the traditional path laid out for us, because you know the blueprint. You know that you go to school and then you go to uni and then you get a job. That is the blueprint, and you kind of know that if I go through a 4-year degree, at the end of it I will have a degree that I know the job, I know the pathway out of that. I know that I can get a job after that in this career, and I kind of know what that's going to look like. Even if that doesn't make you happy, it's sometimes we prefer to be comfortable than to follow the things that we think are going to make us truly happy or make us truly fulfilled, or the things we're going to enjoy more. Because often trying to follow the unprescribed path doesn't really have a blueprint. There is no guarantee for how it's gonna go, especially if you're like, I'm gonna go traveling and try and make my own money, I'm gonna try and be an influencer, I'm gonna try and start my own business and all of those things. And so when you have an idea of something you think you wanna do, but there's no guarantee, it's very easy to come up with all these limiting beliefs, and that's when the limiting beliefs start coming thick and fast about, I can't do this, what if it doesn't work? And that's when you hold yourself back. Imagine if Isaac Newton, love that we're bringing him up again, shout out to Isaac Newton, imagine if he saw that apple on the floor and was like, oh, that's nice, then picked it up and ate it. Imagine! Like, he was curious about something, he experimented, and look what happened. I heard this on a podcast that I listened to, the Goes Without Saying podcast, and I can't remember which one of them it was. One of them went to their therapist. She was feeling really anxious about her driving lessons, and she would just get so stressed about driving. And her therapist said to her, instead of thinking about like, oh God, I need to do well in my driving lesson, or oh God, I have a driving lesson, she needed to go to the driving lesson. And the whole idea of the driving lesson was to just see it happen, get data, and bring it back to her therapist. And so she was almost becoming like a researcher, experimenter. She was no longer going to the driving lesson to have a driving lesson. She was doing the driving lesson so she could tell her therapist about it. And I think that's a really fun concept, because then you can almost take this, and I find myself doing this a lot, and sometimes it like sketches me out of it, but I find myself a lot in situations, instead of being in a situation, you can take this like meta perspective and kind of watch yourself and watch everyone else, or watch the components within the situation, and you almost become the viewer of your life, almost like your life is the Truman Show and you're the guys with the computers. So you're just experimenting, you know, like you put yourself in these situations, and then instead of it just being the situation, because that feels really heavy and scary, like if you move to the US, which is what I'm doing, it's like, oh God, I'm moving to the US. But if I see myself as not Truman, not, what's his, is his name Truman, or is his last name Truman? I love that film, I should watch it again. But not him, like, you're not the character, you're not the puppeteer, you're the master as well. Instead of seeing myself as, oh, I'm moving to the US, oh my God, that's so scary, I see myself as, okay, I'm the experimenter, I'm gonna put myself in this situation, so I'm gonna move to the US, and then I'm just gonna observe what's going on, I'm gonna take data from it, and then I'm going to document it. If you can look at your life as a series of experiments, there can't be any failure. You can't fail if your life is an experiment, because there's no right outcome, because everything you do, you're just seeing what it's going to be like. If what you're doing now is not working for you, then nothing else can be a failure. If what you're doing now isn't making you happy, then any decision you make going forward that you think is going to make you more happy and bring you more joy, and you think you're going to like more, anything you do can't be a failure. The outcome can't fail, because what you're doing right now already isn't working. So any experiment into something else that you think you might like more, or enjoy more, or might make you more fulfilled, that's already a step in the right direction. Life is just a constant stream of iterations, experiments, and we just constantly have to be experimenting with things until we find something that we're like, oh, this really works, like I'm really enjoying this. And then if in a year it doesn't, and it no longer works and you're not enjoying it anymore, then you go on to something else. Your whole life is your experiment. And baby, you are the fucking scientist and you are getting your PhD. Mwah. We are academics. Okay, wait, let's do the question. Let's do the last question. Okay, help me. I want like a cute name for this. I want to do questions at the end, kind of like a homework prompt thing for you to take away from this podcast. So it's not just you've had input, now you can go away and kind of journal on it or think on it. But I want a fun name for it. It was like, I wrote down, like at the moment it's just like homework, but that's fucking boring. And I was like, Polly's prompts sounds like a bit stupid. So help me, if you can think of a fun name for like the end of the podcast questions, I'd appreciate you. Your question for this week, well, I've got two actually. Where in my life have I been pondering too much and not doing anything about it? And the second one is, what would it look like to experiment with the things that I say that I want? Your life is an experiment. You have a PhD. Just do it. All of my podcasts at the moment have just been iterations of just do it. At this point, I need to be sponsored by Nike. Making change is hard. Trying something new is hard. Doing things you've never done before that you don't know the outcome, where the outcome is uncertain, is hard. But the idea of going your whole life never having tried and getting to 90 and looking back on your life and saying, damn, I should have tried that, I should have gone for that, that is harder. You've only got one life. It always comes back to YOLO. Okay, see you next episode. I love you.